Lord Acton's famous warning that absolute power corrupts absolutely describes a literal neurological transformation. In the high-stakes environments of political leadership, power functions less like a moral choice and more like a clinical diagnosis. This is hubris syndrome. It is an acquired personality change triggered by holding significant authority for prolonged periods. It works by physically rewiring the human brain, eventually stripping away the basic cognitive ability to care about the well-being of others. Inside the brain, the shift is measurable. Constant exposure to power triggers chronic dopamine spikes that reinforce feelings of grandiosity. Meanwhile, the neural regions responsible for processing negative feedback and empathy effectively go dark. The brain begins to lose interest in any information that contradicts its own desires. Leaders in this state undergo a profound shift in perception. They begin to feel entirely invulnerable, viewing themselves as beyond the reach of consequences and the rules that govern everyone else. When this neurological isolation meets a political system with zero legal restraints, the checks on human behavior disappear. The leader's internal empathy is gone, and the state's external accountability is non-existent. Political scientist R.J. Rummel documented the historical outcome of this specific neurological deficit. He called it democide, the systematic murder of people by their own government. The 20th century provides the data. This chart shows the 38.5 million people killed in international and civil wars. But notice the 151 million civilians murdered in cold blood by their own regimes. Death by government killed nearly 4 times as many people as war. Joseph Stalin led the list of these mega-murderers. As an absolute dictator, he presided over the deaths of tens of millions through forced famines, slave labor camps, and executions. In China, Mao Zedong's absolute control over policy resulted in a similar scale of slaughter. His campaigns led to a level of mass killing largely hidden from the West for decades. Adolf Hitler completes the triad of the 20th century's most lethal architects of power, utilizing the machinery of the state to exterminate 21 million people outside of military combat. These statistics find their reality here. This is the visceral result of absolute power when it is stripped of any internal capacity for empathy. Rummel identified this as the power principle. The more absolute power a government possesses, the more likely it is to act on the arbitrary whims of an elite, eventually making war on its own subjects. Democratic systems function as a structural break on this pathology. By dividing power between independent courts, a free press, and competing institutions, these systems create constant cross-pressures that force leaders to remain tethered to reality. These rigid systems prevent the neurological drift of hubris syndrome from becoming public policy. They succeed by making absolute authority impossible to consolidate in a single human mind. Today, overt slaughters and physical labor camps invite immediate global intervention. To survive, authoritarian power has adapted, moving its methods from the physical world into the digital one. Digital authoritarianism allows modern regimes to maintain absolute control through the invisible manipulation of cyberspace, using the internet to surveil and repress their populations without the need for visible violence. This table identifies how digital tools reinforce state control. Under repression, first-generation controls like internet shutdowns sever a population's access to information. Third-generation controls use targeted spyware, shadow banning, and disinformation to quietly manipulate public belief and erase dissent. While the tools have evolved from the bullet to the algorithm, the underlying goal remains unchanged: the absolute erasure of any opposition to the regime's power. Historically, the Westphalian ideal gave states absolute authority over everything inside their borders, but the horrors of the 20th century forced a shift. International agreements after World War II began to treat state authority as conditional, making a government's right to rule dependent on its protection of human rights. We are moving from the chunk theory of power, where sovereignty is a single monolithic block, to a basket theory. In this model, sovereignty is a collection of specific rights and duties that can be shared, limited, or even revoked if a leader violates the trust of the governed. The evidence from both history and neuroscience is clear. Power acts as a biological and systemic toxin. When it is allowed to expand without limit, it consistently seeks to destroy everything in its path. Protecting a society requires more than finding a good ruler. It requires the construction of rigid, unforgiving systems of accountability that ensure no single human brain is ever granted absolute control.